The morning light fell gently across the small town of Maple Hill, painting soft gold across rooftops, mailboxes, and sleepy windows. The air carried that calm stillness that comes before a new day. Truly begins a moment suspended between silence and motion. Meera Thompson stood by her window, steaming cup of tea in her hands. Her apartment was quiet, filled with the soft hum of a radio playing old love songs. The sound was faint, like a whisper from another time. Outside, the world was waking up, neighbors rushing for work, children laughing as they chased the school bus, and the wind brushing through the trees. But inside Meera's heart, time moved slower. At 32, she lived a life that seemed peaceful on the outside, a steady job as a high school art teacher, a cozy apartment decorated with plants and warm colors, and friends who called often enough to make sure she was doing fine. Yet there was a kind of stillness in her smile that only she understood. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was something quieter, a longing she never spoke about. A wish she carried gently, like a secret too fragile to be shared. Some people dreamed of adventure. Meera dreamed of connection, not the grand, cinematic kind of love that people made movies about, but something simple, steady, and true. The kind that grows in shared silences and unspoken understanding. She often told herself she was content, that her art, her students, and her independence were enough. But there were nights when the world felt too quiet. And she would wonder if somewhere out there, someone was thinking of her without even knowing her name. That thought both comforted and frightened her. Every morning followed the same rhythm. She walked to the corner cafe before work, ordered her usual black coffee with a hint of vanilla, and sat by the window where sunlight filtered through lace curtains. It was her moment of calm before the day began, her quiet ritual. And then, one morning, something changed. He appeared as naturally as the sunrise, a man she had never seen before, sitting 2 tables away, sketching something in a worn-out notebook. His presence didn't feel intrusive. It felt familiar, as if he belonged to that quiet space without even trying. He looked to be in his mid-30s, wearing a simple gray sweater and carrying an old camera beside him. His hair was slightly tousled and his expression carried a kind of thoughtful calm, the kind that comes from someone who notices beauty in small things. Meera tried not to stare, but her eyes kept wandering back. It wasn't attraction in the usual sense, it was curiosity, a pull she couldn't quite explain. Something about him felt unfinished. It's like a story waiting to be told. She watched as he paused mid-sketch, glanced toward the window, and smiled faintly at the light pouring in. It was the kind of smile that seemed to say thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to life itself. When he caught her looking, Meera quickly turned back to her coffee, feeling the faint warmth rise in her cheeks. She told herself it was nothing, just a stranger passing through her morning routine. Yet the rest of the day, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about that brief encounter mattered. That evening, while grading her students' art projects, Meera paused on a drawing of a girl standing at a bus stop under a cloudy sky. The student had written beneath it, asterisk sometimes, "The waiting is the most beautiful part." Asterisk, the words made her heart ache softly. Waiting, yes, that was what her life had been, in ways she never admitted out loud. Waiting for a feeling that would make her world seem larger again, as night fell. She sat by the window once more, sketchbook in her lap. Drawing without purpose, lines that curved into faces, faces that faded into waves. She didn't realize she was drawing him, the man from the cafe, until the faint outline of his quiet smile appeared on the page. She laughed softly at herself, closing the notebook. "You don't even know his name," she murmured. But deep down she knew this wasn't about him. Not yet. It was about something awakening in her. A quiet stirring of hope she hadn't felt in years before she went to bed. She looked outside at the moonlight spilling across the empty street. The town seemed the same, the world unchanged. But inside her heart, something small had shifted, as if life had whispered, asterisk, pay attention. Asterisk, that night, Meera dreamt of light, warm, golden light, and a voice calling her name through it. She didn't recognize the voice, but it filled her with a strange sense of peace. When she woke up, the dream lingered like a melody she couldn't forget. And for the first time in a long while, she felt excited for the morning. She didn't know that tomorrow, in that same cafe, a conversation would begin, one that would change the rhythm of her quiet life forever. The next morning arrived with a gentle drizzle that turned Maple Hill into a watercolor painting. Raindrops clung to flower petals, the streets shimmered with reflections, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked earth. Meera sat at her favorite cafe table, the same corner seat by the window. The world outside looked softened, blurred by the misty glass, and she watched it quietly, stirring her drink as if trying to match its rhythm. Then, just as she was lost in thought, she heard a familiar voice. "Mind if I sit here? All the other tables are taken." It was him, the man from yesterday. The sketchbook and camera were still with him, a faint smile still lingering on his face. Meera looked around. Indeed, every other seat was full. She nodded, her heart fluttering just slightly. "Of course," she said, keeping her tone calm. He sat down, and for a few moments neither of them spoke. It wasn't uncomfortable silence, it was that gentle, shared quiet that two thoughtful souls can fall into without trying. "I've seen you here before," he said finally. "You always sit in this spot." Meera smiled. "Habit, I guess. It's where the light feels kindest in the morning." He nodded, his gaze following the golden streaks of sunlight breaking through the clouds. "I like that. You notice the light? Most people don't." There was something in his voice, a calm sincerity, the kind that draws you in without effort. "I'm Ryan," he said after a pause, offering his hand. "Meera," she replied, shaking it gently. That was how it began, not with fireworks or fate, but with something much quieter. Two people, two coffees, and a shared appreciation for the stillness of a rainy morning. Over the weeks that followed, their paths crossed naturally, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at the park where Meera liked to sketch, and sometimes on the small wooden bridge that crossed the river behind town. They didn't plan it. It just happened. Their conversations grew longer, but they were never rushed. They spoke about simple things, art, books, favorite childhood memories. Ryan told her about how he used to photograph street musicians in New York before he moved here to escape the noise of the city. Meera shared stories of her students, the quiet ones who painted their feelings instead of speaking them. Ryan listened deeply, the kind of listening that made her feel seen. In return, she found herself laughing more freely, sharing thoughts she usually kept tucked away. There was one afternoon that stayed with her. They had gone walking near the cliffs, where the ocean met the edge of town. The sky was pale blue, and the wind carried the scent of salt and pine. Ryan stopped to take a photograph of the waves. "You see that?" he said, pointing to where the sunlight hit the water. "That shimmer only lasts a few seconds. I've learned to wait for it." Meera watched him and smiled softly. "You're patient." "Not really," he said. "Just afraid of missing beautiful things." Those words lingered with her long after he said them. But life, as it often does, had its own quiet way of testing timing. Ryan's work began calling him away more often. Photo assignments, exhibitions, short trips to nearby cities. He always promised he'd be back soon, and he always kept that promise. But something about those gaps in time made Meera feel the fragility of it all. She never told him that she waited for his messages longer than she should have, or that she checked the cafe window each morning, half hoping to see him sketching again. When he was there, everything felt illuminated. When he wasn't, the world seemed to fade just slightly around the edges. And yet, she never blamed him. She understood the pull of dreams the way they sometimes carried people in directions they couldn't control. One evening, when the season was beginning to turn cold, Ryan invited her to see one of his photographs displayed in a small gallery nearby. She stood in front of it, an image of a quiet street after rain, a single red umbrella reflected in a puddle. "What do you see?" he asked her softly. Meera looked closer. "I see hope," she said. "The kind that doesn't need words." Ryan smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I hoped someone would see." It was their last real conversation before everything changed. A few days later, He told her he'd been offered a long-term photography project in another city. It was a chance of a lifetime, he said, but his eyes carried hesitation, as if the opportunity came with a hidden cost. Meera congratulated him, even smiled. She said all the right words, that he should go, that he deserved it. But when he hugged her goodbye, she felt a quiet ache settle somewhere deep. She didn't cry that night. She simply stood by the window, the same one she always stood by, and watched the streetlights shimmer through the mist. Time moved forward, as it always does. Weeks turned into months. The cafe seat across from her stayed empty. The sound of the rain felt lonelier. Yet even in the absence, something had changed within her. She realized that what Ryan gave her wasn't heartbreak, it was remembrance. A reminder that her heart could still open, still feel, still hope. And though distance had pulled them apart, he remained a gentle memory, a chapter written in quiet tones of light and rain. Meera didn't know that one winter evening, when she least expected it, life would place her at another crossroad, where love, patience, and faith would meet again. The first snow of the season arrived quietly, blanketing Maple Hill in soft white. The streets glistened under a pale winter sun, and the town felt hushed as if holding its breath. Meera walked slowly through the park, her scarf wrapped snugly around her neck, her thoughts drifting like the falling flakes. It had been almost a year since she had last seen Ryan. Life had carried them in different directions. Her routine steady, his projects far away, yet the memory of his quiet smile, the way he noticed small details, lingered in her mind like a gentle echo. As she rounded a familiar corner near the river, her breath caught unexpectedly. There he was, Ryan, standing just beyond the bridge, his camera hanging by his side, looking as though he belonged to this moment. Just as he had a year ago. For a long second, neither spoke. Time seemed to fold around them, collapsing months of absence into one shared heartbeat. "Meera," Ryan said finally, his voice soft, almost hesitant. She gave a small, uncertain smile. "Hi, Ryan." The simplest words, yet weighted with unspoken meaning. They began walking together slowly along the snow-dusted path. Neither rushed, both aware that some things could not be hurried. The crisp air carried the faint scent of pine and frost, and the only sound was the crunch of their footsteps. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," Ryan said, glancing at her with that familiar warmth in his eyes. "I didn't know if you'd come back," Meera replied softly, her words careful, gentle. She realized that her chest had been holding this moment for months, a mix of hope, hesitation, and relief. They fell into easy conversation. Not about the past directly, but about small details: the snow on the riverbank, a cafe that had reopened downtown, the town's holiday decorations. Each word, each glance carried the weight of familiarity. At one point, Ryan stopped and picked up a small fallen pinnock. He handed it to her without a word. Meera turned it in her hands, noticing how ordinary yet thoughtful the gesture was. "I kept thinking about this place," he said quietly. "It feels like home somehow, even when I was gone." Meera's eyes softened. "I think that's how I felt too. The town, the streets, the memories. They never really left me." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. No words were needed. In the quiet, there was understanding that distance had not erased what had begun. That absence had made the heart's truth clearer. As they continued walking, Meera realized how much she had missed these small interactions, the way someone could be present without overwhelming, the way a glance could convey trust, care, and curiosity all at once. "You look different," Ryan said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Not in a bad way. Just you seem settled." "I've learned to appreciate small things," Meera said, returning his smile, "and to wait for moments that matter." He nodded as though he understood perfectly. There was a pause, a soft silence where the snow continued to fall around them. Then Meera spoke hesitantly. "Did you ever regret leaving?" Ryan shook his head slowly. "No, I needed to go. But I thought about this about you more than I can say. And now, I think I understand what I was missing." Her chest tightened slightly. The words were simple, but they carried years of longing, quiet reflection, and patience. She realized that old emotions, the warmth of companionship, the quiet comfort of someone noticing the details of her life had returned without fanfare, blending seamlessly with the present. "You never changed," she said softly. "You still notice the little things." Ryan's eyes met hers, steady and gentle. "And you still see the world with hope. That hasn't changed either." They stopped at the edge of the frozen river, looking at the reflection of the sky and the icy surface. Meera noticed how the light caught Ryan's hair, how the snow on his coat seemed almost symbolic, a fresh beginning, blank and pure. "You know," he said after a moment, "I thought this town would feel smaller after being away. But standing here with you, it feels bigger, more alive." Meera felt a lump in her throat, not from sadness, but from the quiet intensity of connection, the human kind that doesn't need grand gestures or words, only presence and understanding. "I've missed this," she admitted. "Being here, talking like this, just simple moments." "Me too," he said. "More than I expected." And in that shared acknowledgement, something shifted. Not a sudden, overwhelming emotion, but a calm certainty. Life had tested them, carried them apart. And yet here they were, standing in the same winter light, aware that the bond they had formed months ago had never truly faded. The town square was quiet in the late afternoon, the winter sun lowering slowly, casting long shadows across cobblestone streets. Maple Hill had that familiar hush of a place caught between seasons, the kind of peace that invites reflection. Meera walked slowly toward the small cafe where she and Ryan had first met, her scarf fluttering gently in the crisp air. She hadn't heard from him directly since their walk by the river, and the uncertainty of what the next moment might bring made her heart pound softly. Yet she didn't feel anxious. Instead, she felt that quiet anticipation that comes when a long-held truth is about to unfold. When she entered, she found Ryan waiting by their usual corner table, sketchbook open, coffee steaming beside him. His gaze met hers immediately, warm, steady, and patient. "Hi," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi, Meera," he replied, his voice carrying that familiar, calm assurance. For a while, they simply watched each other, sharing the comfort of presence. Words weren't necessary yet. In the pause, they both acknowledged everything unspoken, the months of waiting, the distance, the small moments they had carried silently in their hearts. Finally, Ryan took a deep breath. "I wanted to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago." Meera's heart skipped a beat. She nodded, encouraging him to continue, though part of her wished the moment could stretch forever. "Without need for words, I realized while I was away," he said slowly, "that life can take you in many directions, but the people who matter, they leave an imprint that distance can't erase. You left that mark on me, Meera. I kept thinking about you, your laughter, your quiet kindness, the way you notice things. And I realized I don't want to go another day without being honest about that." Her eyes softened, and a gentle warmth spread across her chest. She understood more than he could know. She had felt the same pull, the same quiet longing during all those months. "I never stopped thinking about you either," she admitted, "even when you were far away, even when I tried to focus on other things. You were there in small ways, in the light, in the rain, in moments that reminded me what hope feels like." Ryan smiled, a small, almost shy curve of his lips. "Then maybe we were meant to find our way back here, together, or at least with a chance to try." Meera reached out, placing her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of months of waiting, of reflection, of courage quietly building in both hearts. "I want to try," she said, softly, firmly. The words hung in the air, and a silence followed, not awkward, but full of understanding, like the space between two notes in a beautiful song. It was the kind of silence that doesn't need filling because everything that mattered had already been said. Ryan squeezed her hand gently. I don't want to rush anything. I just want to be present, to see where this leads, to share life in whatever pace we need. Meera nodded. That's all I could ever want. Patience, kindness, understanding, and honesty. They spent the next hour talking quietly. About small things at first, the cafe's new seasonal menu. A book Meera had started, the snowflakes drifting against the window. Slowly, the conversation shifted to dreams, hopes, and the ways they had grown during the time apart. They laughed softly at remembered missteps, smiled at shared memories, and found comfort in the simple rhythm of companionship. By the time the sun had lowered completely, painting the sky in pink and gold, both felt a calm certainty. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, only the quiet, deep knowledge that two hearts, patient and brave, had found their way back to each other. Ryan looked out the window for a moment. Then back at Meera. "You've taught me something important," he said. "That love isn't always about urgency. Sometimes it's about waiting, about trusting the process, and about showing up when it matters most." Meera smiled, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes, tears not of sadness but of relief and fulfillment. "And you've reminded me that hope is worth holding on to, that sometimes the heart knows what the mind takes longer to understand." As they left the cafe together, snow crunching softly beneath their feet, Meera realized how much she had grown. She had learned patience, resilience, and the quiet power of trust. She had learned that love could be tender, respectful, and profoundly moving without ever needing to rush, demand, or overwhelm. Ryan paused at the edge of the park, looking at her. "No matter what happens, I'm grateful for this. For you, for us." Meera's smile held every unspoken word, every emotion that had carried her through months of reflection. "Me too, more than you'll ever know." And in that simple, heartfelt moment, they understood something vital, that love's true power lies not in dramatic gestures or instant gratification, but in quiet persistence, honest hearts, and the courage to show up fully, even when the future is uncertain. As the sun finally dipped behind the horizon, painting Maple Hill in the soft glow of twilight, Meera felt a deep, enduring peace. Life had tested her patience, her hope, and her heart. But through it all, she had learned what it truly meant to feel deeply, with respect, with care, and with a heart wide open to love. Some stories don't need grand finales to be meaningful. Sometimes they end quietly, with understanding, gratitude, and hope. Meera and Ryan's story was one of those. A tale of hearts recognizing each other, of patience rewarded, and of love that grows gently, persistently, and beautifully.